My grandfather left me a worthless coin collection. My cousins mocked me until I got it appraised at $2 million. Grandpa Hayes died on a Tuesday. By Thursday, the vultures were circling. My cousins descended on his modest ranch house like locusts, eyeing the antique furniture and jewelry collection. My Aunt Deborah made a beeline for the china cabinet, while my Uncle Richard started measuring the vintage dining set. "There will readings tomorrow," I reminded them. Deborah waved me off, just getting a head start on organizing everything. The next day, we sat in Attorney O'Connell's cramped office as he read Grandpa's will. The good stuff, the house, the cars, the investments, went to my Uncle Richard, the eldest son. My cousin split the jewelry and antiques. Various relatives got smaller cash amounts. Then, O'Connell cleared his throat. To my grandson, Ethan, who spent every summer helping me catalog my collection, I leave my complete coin collection and all related materials. The room went silent. Then, my cousin Samantha snorted. "Seriously, those dusty old pennies and mason jars?" My cousin Kevin laughed. "Grandpa tried to show me those things every visit. Total junk." "Sorry, Ethan." Uncle Richard patted my shoulder. "Don't feel bad. At least you got something." Deborah whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Poor Ethan. Always was Hayes's favorite, and this is what he gets." I said nothing. Grandpa had spent countless hours teaching me about those coins, their history, their origins, how to identify valuable pieces. While my cousins were outside playing, I was learning about mint marks and rare dates. After the reading, I drove to Grandpa's house. Uncle Richard was already directing movers. "Take whatever coins you want," he called out. "We're donating the rest to charity." I found Grandpa's collection exactly where he'd left it in his study, organized in labeled albums and protective holders. There were hundreds of coins spanning decades. My cousin saw worthless old money. I saw a lifetime of careful curation. It took me 3 trips to move everything to my apartment. The following Monday, I called Sterling Rare Coins, the coin shop Grandpa had mentioned. The owner, Mr. Chun, agreed to do a preliminary assessment. "Bring everything," he said. "Your grandfather had quite the reputation among collectors." Wednesday morning, I loaded my car with boxes and drove to Sterling Rare Coins. Mr. Chin's eyes widened when I started unpacking. "Sweet mother of pearl," he whispered, examining a particular coin under his magnifying glass. "Is this what I think it is?" he called in his partner, Ms. Miller. They huddled over several pieces, speaking in hushed tones. "Young man," Mr. Chin finally said, "I need to call in a specialist. This collection requires professional authentication." By Friday, word had spread through the numismatic community. Dr. Albright, a renowned university professor of numismatics from the State University, arrived with specialized equipment. He examined each piece methodically. After 6 hours, he looked up with a stunned expression. "Your grandfather had exquisite taste," Dr. Albright said quietly, "and apparently incredible luck." That's when he showed me the 1909 SVDB penny, one of only 484,000 ever minted, and the 1916 D Mercury dime in pristine condition, and the 1893 S Morgan silver dollar that made his hands shake. "Conservative estimate," Dr. Albright said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're looking at somewhere between $1.8 and $2.2 million. I sat in stunned silence. Mr. Chin nodded gravely. "Your grandfather knew exactly what he had. He'd been building this collection for 60 years. I thought about my cousins laughing about Uncle Richard's condescending pat on the shoulder, about Deborah's whispered pity. "I need official documentation," I said. Dr. Albright handed me his card. "I'll have a complete appraisal ready by Tuesday, but I'm telling you now, this is one of the most valuable private collections I've ever seen." I drove home in a daze. That evening, I called my mom to tell her the news. $2 million? She gasped. "Ethan, are you sure? Getting it officially appraised." Next week, there was a long pause. "Have you told anyone else?" "Not yet. Maybe keep it quiet until you decide what to do." But word was already spreading. Dr. Albright had mentioned the discovery to colleagues. Mr. Chin's shop was buzzing with rumors. By Monday morning, my phone was ringing. "Ethan?" It was Cousin Samantha. Her voice suddenly sweet. "I heard the craziest rumor about Grandpa's coins." "What kind of rumor?" I asked, knowing exactly where this was headed. "That they might be worth something." "I mean, that's ridiculous, right? We all saw them. But I was thinking, maybe we should get them appraised together as a family. Split whatever we find." I almost laughed. Split them? They were left to me. Well, yes, but family should share these kinds of discoveries. Grandpa would have wanted that. He was always talking about family unity and helping each other out. The same woman who'd called them dusty old pennies 3 days ago. The same woman who'd rolled her eyes every time Grandpa tried to show anyone his hobby. That's funny, I said, because I remember Grandpa trying to show you his coin books last Christmas, and you told him you had better things to do than look at old junk. I was stressed about finals, she said defensively. That doesn't mean I didn't care about his interests. Right. Well, the coins are being professionally appraised, and then I'll decide what to do with them. Ethan, please don't be hasty about this. We should all sit down and discuss it as a family. Maybe bring in a mediator. A mediator for what? To help us figure out what's fair. What Grandpa really would have wanted if he'd known about the value. I hung up on her. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts. Kevin wanted to discuss the collection. Deborah thought we should research together. Uncle Richard left a voicemail about family obligations and making sure everyone's interests are protected. The vultures weren't just circling anymore. They were diving. That afternoon, Uncle Richard showed up at my apartment with Kevin and Deborah in tow. They looked like a corporate delegation arriving for hostile takeover negotiations. We need to talk, Richard said, pushing past me into my living room without invitation. They arranged themselves on my couch like an intervention committee. Richard sat in the center, Deborah to his right, Kevin to his left. All three wore serious expressions that I'm sure they'd practiced in the car. This rumor about the coins? Deborah began, her voice taking on that condescending tone she used when explaining things to children. We think there's been a misunderstanding about how to handle this situation. What misunderstanding? I asked, remaining standing near the door. Kevin leaned forward eagerly. Grandpa was old. Ethan, sometimes wills don't reflect what people really intended, especially when new information comes to light. He intended for me to have his coin collection. That seems pretty clear. Richard's voice turned stern. The tone he'd used to discipline me as a kid. Don't be selfish, Ethan. We're family. Whatever value these coins have should benefit everyone, not just one person who happened to get lucky. Lucky? I felt my temper rising. I spent every summer for 12 years learning about those coins. Every visit, every holiday, while you all were busy with your own lives, I was sitting with Grandpa learning about mint marks and historical significance and proper storage techniques. That doesn't entitle you to millions of dollars. Deborah snapped, her mask of concern slipping. It was supposed to be a sentimental gesture, not a lottery ticket. Funny how it's suddenly millions of dollars when you thought it was worthless junk a week ago. Kevin stood up, his face flushing red. Look, we can do this easy or hard, but we're not letting you walk away with a fortune while the rest of us get nothing. Are you threatening me? I asked, my hand moving instinctively toward my phone. Richard held up his hands in a gesture meant to look peaceful, but his eyes were hard. Nobody's threatening anyone. We're just saying. Lawyers can be expensive. Contested wills take years to resolve. Court fees, legal bills, expert witnesses. Wouldn't it be easier to work something out among ourselves like civilized people? What kind of something? Deborah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. 50-50th split. You keep half for your sentimental attachment. The family divides the other half. Everyone walks away happy. And if I refuse, then we'll have to explore our legal options, Richard said. We've already spoken to an attorney. There are grounds to contest the will if we can show Grandpa was either mentally incompetent when he wrote it or didn't understand the true value of what he was leaving you. Grandpa was sharp as a tack until the day he died. You know that, do we? Kevin asked. An 87-year-old man makes a bequest worth millions to one grandchild while leaving everyone else out. That sounds like diminished capacity to me. Deborah nodded sagely. Plus, there's the issue of undue influence. You spending all that time alone with him, isolating him from the rest of the family, manipulating an elderly man into favoring you in his will. I stared at them in disbelief. Isolating him. I was the only one who visited regularly. I was the only one who called him every week. I was the only one who remembered his birthday last year. That's exactly what we're talking about, Richard said. You deliberately cultivated a special relationship to influence his decisions. I cultivated a relationship because I loved him and he was lonely. Where were all of you when he was in the hospital last year? I was there every day for 2 weeks. We all have jobs and responsibilities, Deborah said defensively. So do I. But I made time. See, Kevin pointed at me. You're already acting superior, like you deserved more because you were the good grandchild. That's manipulation. I looked at these three people, my own family, and realized I was seeing them clearly for the first time. They weren't grieving Grandpa's death or honoring his memory. They were angry about money they'd never expected to exist and furious that it wasn't going to them. Get out, I said quietly. Ethan, be reasonable, Richard started. Get out of my apartment now. They exchanged glances. Deborah's voice turned cold. You're making a mistake. We're trying to be fair here. Fair would be respecting Grandpa's wishes. Grandpa's wishes were written when he thought those coins were worthless. Kevin said, use your head, Ethan. If he'd known they were worth millions, do you really think he'd have left everything to one person? Yes, because he knew I was the only one who cared about them for reasons beyond money. After they left, I double-locked my door and called my mom. They came to my apartment. I told her, demanded I split the inheritance. Mom was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? Honor Grandpa's wishes? He left them to me for a reason. This is going to get ugly, honey. Richard's always been territorial about family money, and Deborah's, well, you know how she gets. I knew Deborah had been bitter ever since her divorce when her ex-husband had left her for his secretary and stuck her with minimal alimony. She'd been looking for a financial windfall ever since. I'm going to talk to a lawyer tomorrow, I said. Good. And Ethan, your grandfather would be proud of you for standing up to them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all those summer afternoons with Grandpa, sitting at his dining room table while he carefully showed me each coin, explaining its history and significance. He taught me about the 1943 copper penny, one of the most valuable coins in existence because it was struck by mistake. About the 1933 double eagle that was never supposed to be released, about the joy of finding a rare date in a handful of pocket change. Collecting isn't about the money, Ethan, he'd said. It's about preserving history. Each coin is a piece of someone's story. Tuesday morning, I called Attorney O'Connell to discuss the family's threats. They can contest, he said, but it'll be expensive for them, and the evidence of your grandfather's competency is strong. His medical records show no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. His financial management right up until his death demonstrates clear thinking. The will was properly witnessed and notarized. What about their claims of undue influence? Harder to prove? The fact that you had a close relationship with your grandfather isn't illegal or improper. If anything, it supports his decision to leave you something meaningful. What about the coins themselves? Legally, yours as soon as the will clears probate, which should be straightforward for the uncontested portions, but I'd suggest moving them somewhere secure until this gets resolved. After hanging up, I called the bank and arranged for a large safety deposit box. That afternoon, I carefully transported the entire collection, documenting each piece with photographs before locking them away. As I was loading the last box into my car, Kevin appeared from behind a parked SUV. Going somewhere? He asked, his tone casual, but his eyes focused on the boxes in my back seat. Bank, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Smart move. Wouldn't want anything to happen to Grandpa's legacy. There was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. A hint of threat wrapped in false concern. What's that supposed to mean? Kevin shrugged. Things get lost. Apartments get robbed. Accidents happen. Good thing you're being careful. He walked away without another word, leaving me standing in the parking lot with a chill running down my spine. That afternoon, my apartment was broken into. I came home from work to find my front door slightly ajar. The frame splintered around the lock. Inside, everything had been searched. Drawers pulled out, couch cushions scattered, even my refrigerator moved away from the wall. But nothing was taken because there was nothing to take. The coins were safely locked away in the bank. Whoever had searched my place had been looking for something specific and had been frustrated not to find it. I called the police immediately. The responding officer, Detective Ramirez, was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She took photos of the damage and dusted for fingerprints. Any idea who might want to break in? She asked. Anything valuable that someone might know about? I told her about the coin collection and the family dispute. Family money brings out the worst in people, she said, shaking her head. You should document everything. Phone calls, threats, visits. If this escalates, you'll need evidence. You think it will escalate? $2 million? Yeah, it'll escalate. She was right. Friday morning, I received legal papers delivered by a stern-faced process server. Richard was officially contesting the will, claiming diminished capacity and undue influence. They were demanding the coin collection be held in escrow pending resolution and seeking damages for emotional distress caused by my manipulation of their elderly father. The papers also included affidavit from Deborah and Kevin supporting Richard's claims. Deborah swore that Grandpa had seemed confused and easily influenced during his final years. Kevin claimed I had systematically isolated Grandpa from the rest of the family and coached him on what to include in his will. Reading their lies made me physically sick. That afternoon, Samantha showed up at my work, a small financial consulting firm where I was a junior accountant. She cornered me in the parking lot as I was leaving for the day. "You're really going to put the family through this?" she asked, blocking my path to my car. "I'm honoring Grandpa's wishes." "Grandpa's wishes?" She laughed bitterly. Grandpa's wishes were for his family to be taken care of, not for one spoiled grandkid to hoard everything while the rest of us struggle. Struggle? You drive a Lexus and live in a condo downtown. That's not the point. The point is family loyalty, something you clearly never learned. I learned it from Grandpa. Real family loyalty means respecting people's decisions, not attacking them when they don't benefit you. You think you're so special because you were his favorite. You think those summers you spent with him make you better than the rest of us. I think those summers taught me about who Grandpa really was. Not the old man you all saw as a burden, but someone with passions and knowledge and stories to share. Oh, please. Samantha's voice dripped with contempt. You were a lonely kid with no friends. Grandpa felt sorry for you, so he let you hang around while he played with his coins. Don't mistake pity for preference. That stung because part of it was true. I had been lonely. My parents had divorced when I was 8, and I'd spent summers with Grandpa because Mom was working double shifts and Dad was starting his new family. But Grandpa had never made me feel like a charity case. Maybe I was lonely, I said, but at least I was there. At least I listened when he tried to share something he cared about. He tried to share it with all of us. We just had better things to do than humor an old man's obsessions. And that's exactly why he left the collection to me. Samantha stepped closer, her face flushed with anger. You think you're so righteous, but you're just greedy. If you really cared about honoring Grandpa's memory, you'd share with the family he loved. The family that barely visited him, the family that forgot his birthday, the family that put him in assisted living and visited twice a month. He needed professional care. He needed family. Real family, not people who saw him as an obligation. Samantha slapped me. The sound echoed across the parking lot, and several coworkers who were leaving turned to stare. My cheek burned, but I didn't retaliate. Feel better? I asked. She burst into tears. Whether from anger, frustration, or guilt, I couldn't tell. This is tearing the family apart, she sobbed. Can't you see that? The family tore itself apart the minute you all decided money was more important than respecting Grandpa's wishes. I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot. That weekend, I drove to Grandpa's house, now officially Richard's property, according to the will. I still had a key and wanted to retrieve some personal items Grandpa had specifically left me. His coin reference books, his magnifying glass, and a few photographs from our summers together. I found Richard in Grandpa's study going through the desk with methodical precision. Looking for something? I asked from the doorway. He startled, then quickly composed himself, just organizing paperwork. Dad kept everything, and I mean everything. Medical records going back 20 years. Tax returns, correspondence with coin dealers. That last part caught my attention. I noticed he was specifically searching through Grandpa's coin catalogs and reference books, making notes on a yellow legal pad. Those aren't part of the estate, I said. The will specified. All coin-related materials come to me. Richard's face reddened. Don't be ridiculous. A few old books aren't worth fighting over. Then you won't mind if I take them. He moved to block my path to the bookshelf. Everything in this house stays put until the will dispute is resolved. I'm not letting you remove anything that might be relevant to our case. What case? Those books aren't part of your claim. Says who? If Dad was using those books to evaluate his collection, they're evidence of what he knew about the coin's value. I realized what Richard was doing. He was trying to build a case that Grandpa had either known exactly how valuable the coins were, in which case why wouldn't he share such wealth with the whole family, or that he'd been confused about their value, supporting the diminished capacity claim. That's not how it works, I said. The non-contested items can be distributed immediately. Richard stepped closer, his voice taking on that threatening tone I remembered from childhood arguments. You want to test that theory? Because I've got lawyers who disagree, and unlike you, I can afford to fight this for years. It was a clear intimidation tactic designed to remind me that Richard controlled the family's substantial resources while I was just a junior accountant with limited savings. I left without the books, but not before taking photos of everything on his desk. Among the papers was a handwritten list of coin dealers in 3 states along with notes about authentication processes and value determination timelines. Monday morning, I called O'Connell and described what I'd seen. He's trying to prove the valuable coins weren't properly inventoried in the original will, O'Connell explained. If he can show your grandfather didn't know their true value when he wrote the will, he might argue the bequest was based on misinformation. But the will specifically mentions the complete coin collection and all related materials. It doesn't list individual pieces or values. Doesn't matter to Richard's strategy. If he can demonstrate your grandfather thought he was leaving you pocket change, not a fortune, he might claim undue influence or mistake of fact. What do you mean mistake of fact? If Richard can prove your grandfather was under the mistaken impression that his coins were essentially worthless, he could argue the bequest was made under false pretenses. The court might then distribute the collection according to what your grandfather would have wanted if he'd known the true value. My stomach dropped. Can he do that? It's a long shot, but not impossible. That's why he's documenting everything, trying to show a pattern of your grandfather either not knowing or deliberately concealing the collection's value from the family. That afternoon, I received a call from Mr. Chun at Sterling Rare Coins. Someone's been asking questions about your grandfather, he said, his voice concerned. Man came in yesterday, claiming to be researching Arthur's collection for legal purposes. Wanted to know when your grandfather last brought coins in. What he said about their value, whether he seemed confused or forgetful. My pulse quickened. What did you tell him? The truth. That Arthur was one of the sharpest collectors I ever met. Knew exactly what he had. Always asked informed questions. Never seemed confused about anything. But this guy seemed disappointed with my answers. What did he look like? Tall, expensive suit, aggressive manner. Had a briefcase full of legal documents. Said he was working with the family to clarify some inheritance issues. That had to be Richard's attorney fishing for evidence to support their case. Did he ask about specific coins? Yeah, and that's the weird part. He had a list of the most valuable pieces in your grandfather's collection. Asked if Arthur had ever mentioned them by name, ever discussed their worth, ever seemed surprised by their value. My blood ran cold. How could he have a list of specific coins? That's what I was wondering. The only way he'd know exactly what was in the collection is if someone had already cataloged everything, which meant Richard had somehow gotten access to Dr. Albright's appraisal, or possibly had hired his own expert to evaluate the coins I'd moved to the bank. That evening, I sat in my apartment, still damaged from the break-in, trying to figure out Richard's strategy. If he was building a case that Grandpa didn't know the coin's value, he'd need to explain how an experienced collector could accidentally accumulate millions of dollars worth of rare pieces. But if he was building a case that Grandpa did know the value, he'd need to explain why a loving grandfather would deliberately exclude his other grandchildren from such wealth. Either way, I was the target. Wednesday morning brought another surprise. I arrived at work to find a private investigator waiting in the lobby. "Are you Ethan?" he asked, approaching with a clipboard and badge. "Yes, I'm conducting interviews for a legal matter involving your grandfather's estate. Can I ask you a few questions?" I looked around the lobby, aware that my coworkers and boss were watching this interaction with interest. "Not without my lawyer present," I said. The investigator smiled. "Nothing formal. Just trying to get a timeline of your relationship with your grandfather. When did you start visiting him regularly? Who initiated those visits? Did he ever discuss the contents or value of his coin collection?" I said, "Not without my lawyer." "Did your grandfather ever seem confused or forgetful during your visits? Did he ever repeat stories or forget conversations you'd had?" Several coworkers had gathered nearby, pretending to check their mail while obviously listening to our conversation. "Are you working for my Uncle Richard?" I asked. "I'm conducting an investigation into potential elder abuse and undue influence." Elder abuse. My voice rose, and now everyone in the lobby was staring. "Allegations that you systematically isolated your grandfather from his family and manipulated him into changing his will to benefit you exclusively." The words hit me like physical blows. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger. "Get out," I said. "Sir, I'm just trying to get out." The investigator left, but the damage was done. My boss, Mr. Thompson, called me into his office an hour later. Ethan, what was that about? Elder abuse, inheritance disputes? This is a professional workplace. I explained the situation as best I could, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Even if he believed my version of events, having private investigators show up at work didn't look good. Maybe you should take some personal time to sort this out, he suggested. Get it resolved before it affects your work here. It was a polite way of saying I was becoming a liability. That afternoon, Detective Ramirez called with an update about my break-in. We got the fingerprint results back, she said. Your cousin Kevin's prints were all over your bedroom window frame, so he did break in. Looks that way. Plus, we executed a search warrant on his car and found some interesting items. Lockpicks, a crowbar, latex gloves, and a handwritten list of local coin dealers with their addresses and hours of operation. My stomach clenched. What was he planning? Best guess? He thought you still had the coins at home. When the break-in didn't turn up anything, he was probably going to try fencing them after stealing them from wherever you'd moved them. Can you arrest him? We did. Picked him up this morning on charges of breaking and entering, possession of burglary tools, and attempted theft. He's in jail awaiting arraignment. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Kevin and I had been close as kids before money and family politics poisoned everything. There's something else, Detective Ramirez continued. During questioning, Kevin claimed his father and aunt knew about his plan to search your apartment. Richard and Deborah knew. According to Kevin, they discussed recovering the family's assets, and Richard suggested Kevin take a look around your place to see if the coins were still there. Kevin says he was just following family orders. This changed everything. If Richard and Deborah had conspired with Kevin, they could all face criminal charges. What happens now? We're investigating. If we can prove conspiracy, your uncle and aunt could be charged as accessories. In the meantime, Kevin's looking at serious jail time. After hanging up, I called O'Connell with the news. This is good for us, he said. Criminal conspiracy to steal your inheritance seriously undermines their civil case. Hard to claim they're acting in your grandfather's best interests when they're trying to steal from you. Will this make them back down? Maybe. Or it might make them more desperate. People facing criminal charges don't always make rational decisions. Thursday morning proved his point. I woke up to find my car windows smashed and the tires slashed. A note tucked under the windshield wiper read, "Drop the charges or it gets worse." I called Detective Ramirez immediately. Escalation, she said after examining the damage. Classic intimidation tactics. Any security cameras in your parking lot? I don't think so. We'll check with nearby businesses. In the meantime, you should consider staying somewhere else for a while and definitely don't travel alone. That afternoon, I moved into a hotel near downtown, paying cash and registering under a fake name. The paranoia felt ridiculous, but the message on my car had been clear. Friday brought news that Kevin had been released on bail, posted by Richard, according to Detective Ramirez. He's got conditions, she assured me. No contact with you. No going near your residence or workplace, but be careful anyway. That evening, as I sat in my anonymous hotel room, I found myself thinking about Grandpa again. What would he make of all this? His family turning against each other, his grandson in hiding, his carefully preserved collection at the center of a bitter legal battle. I pulled out my phone and called Ms. Miller at Sterling Rare Coins. "I need to ask you something about my grandfather," I said. "Did he ever talk about his family, about what would happen to his collection after he died?" There was a long pause. "He did, actually, especially in the last year or so." "What did he say?" "He was worried about your cousins, about their attitudes toward money and responsibility. He said most of them saw his coins as junk, but that you understood what they really represented." "Did he know how valuable they were?" "Oh, honey, of course he knew. Arthur had been collecting for 60 years. He knew exactly what everything was worth, probably down to the penny." Ms. Miller was quiet for a moment. "He said something once that stuck with me. He said, money changes people, and not usually for the better. Better to let them think it's worthless junk than watch them fight over it while I'm still alive." My eyes filled with tears. Grandpa had known exactly what would happen if the family discovered the collection's value. He'd protected everyone from their own greed as long as he could. "There's something else," Ms. Miller continued. "Your grandfather left something here for you. A sealed envelope with instructions to give it to you after his death. I forgot about it until yesterday with everything that's been happening." "What kind of envelope?" "Personal letter looks like." He dropped it off about 6 months ago. Said it contains some important information you'd need if anything happened to the collection. I drove to the coin shop immediately, taking a circuitous route and checking my mirrors constantly. The envelope was exactly as Ms. Miller had described, sealed with my name written in Grandpa's careful handwriting. I opened it in my car, hands shaking. Ethan, if you're reading this, then my collection has found its way to you as intended. By now, you've probably discovered its true value and realized why I never mentioned the specifics to the family. Those coins represent 60 years of careful hunting, trading, and patience. Each piece was chosen for its rarity, its history, or its beauty. You're the only person who ever showed genuine interest in understanding that history. Your cousin saw old money. You saw stories. Richard will try to claim I didn't know what I was leaving you. In Safety Deposit Box 847 at First National Bank, you'll find documentation proving otherwise. The key is taped under the bottom drawer of my desk, the drawer that locks. I trusted you with my collection because you understood its real value was never the money. It was the connection to history, the preservation of stories, the joy of discovery. Don't let them take what belongs to you, but don't let it change who you are either. Love, Grandpa. P.S. If things get really bad, there's one more thing in the safety deposit box that might help. Something I hoped I'd never need to use. My hands were shaking as I finished reading. Grandpa had known this would happen. He'd prepared for it. But first, I needed to get that key from his desk. I drove to Richard's house, the house that had been Grandpa's, and parked across the street, watching for any sign of activity. Richard's car wasn't in the driveway, and the house looked empty. I still had the key Grandpa had given me years ago. I waited until dark, then slipped through the back gate and entered through the kitchen door. The study looked exactly as Richard had left it. Papers scattered across the desk, books pulled from shelves, filing cabinet standing open. I found the locked drawer exactly where Grandpa had described it, a small key taped to its underside. As I was prying the key loose, I heard the front door open. Told you he might come back here, Richard's voice carried down the hallway. Check the study first. I pocketed the key and looked for another way out. The study had a window that opened onto the side yard, but it would be visible from the front of the house. Footsteps approached down the hallway. If he's here, we corner him. Deborah's voice. Make him understand this has gone far enough. I slipped behind the heavy curtains just as the study light came on. Desk's been moved, Richard said. Someone's been here. Maybe it was the cleaning lady, Deborah suggested. I gave the cleaning lady the week off. Didn't want anyone here while we're dealing with this legal situation. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see Richard examining his desk, checking to see if anything was missing. The drawer has been disturbed, he said. The tape's gone. What tape? Dad mentioned something once about keeping important papers in a locked drawer. I've been trying to find the key for weeks. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure they could hear it. Maybe Ethan found it, Deborah said. If he did, we need to know what's in that safety deposit box before he does. They stood in the study for another 10 minutes. Richard growing increasingly agitated as he searched for any sign of what I might have taken. Finally, they left to check the rest of the house. I waited another 20 minutes before slipping out the window and making my way back to my car. Saturday morning, I was at First National Bank when it opened. Safety Deposit Box 847 was exactly where Grandpa had said it would be, accessed with both the key I'd retrieved and a signature card he'd prepared in advance. Inside the box was a treasure trove of documentation that made Richard's legal case fall apart instantly. Insurance appraisals dating back 20 years, showing Grandpa had been getting his most valuable coins professionally evaluated on a regular basis. Purchase receipts for individual pieces that had cost him thousands of dollars. Clearly not the actions of someone who thought his collection was worthless. Correspondence with other collectors discussing specific rare finds, market values, and investment strategies. But the most damning evidence was a series of letters Grandpa had written to Richard over the past 5 years. The first, dated 3 years ago, offered to leave the coin collection to the family if anyone showed interest in learning about it. Richard had responded by calling it a boring, old man hobby and suggesting Grandpa find something more useful to do with his time. The second from 2 years ago specifically mentioned the collection's substantial value and suggested Richard might want to reconsider his dismissive attitude. Richard's response was even more insulting, calling the coins worthless trinkets and telling Grandpa to stop bothering everyone with that junk. The final letter from 8 months ago was Grandpa's last attempt to engage the family. He'd offered to teach anyone who was interested about coin collecting, explaining that the hobby could be quite lucrative for those with patience and knowledge. Richard's response had been brutal. "Nobody cares about your stupid coins, Dad. Stop wasting our time with this nonsense." But there was one more item in the safety deposit box that Grandpa had mentioned in his letter, something he'd hoped never to use. It was a video recording dated just 3 months before his death. I watched it on the bank's computer, and my heart broke. The video showed Grandpa sitting at his kitchen table, looking directly at the camera. His voice was clear and strong, his eyes alert and focused. "My name is Arthur Hayes," he began. "Today is September 15th, and I am making this recording because I'm concerned about what might happen to my coin collection after I die." He went on to detail the collection's value, his decision-making process for choosing an heir, and his growing frustration with his family's dismissive attitude toward his hobby. "I've tried repeatedly to share this interest with my children and grandchildren," he said. "Only my grandson, Ethan, has shown genuine curiosity and appreciation for what these coins represent. The others have made it clear they consider my collection worthless junk." The video continued for nearly an hour with Grandpa methodically explaining his relationship with each family member, their attitudes toward his collecting, and his reasons for leaving everything to me. The final part was devastating. If my family is watching this recording, it means they're challenging my will and claiming I didn't understand what I was doing. I want to be absolutely clear. I knew exactly what my collection was worth. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I chose Ethan because he's the only one who understood that these coins are more than just money. They're pieces of history that deserve to be preserved and appreciated. He looked directly at the camera, his expression stern but sad. "To my son, Richard, you told me my coins were worthless trinkets. You were wrong about their value, and you were wrong about their importance. I hope someday you understand the difference. To my daughter, Deborah, you said nobody cares about my hobby. Ethan cared. He listened to my stories, asked thoughtful questions, and helped me catalog everything with genuine interest. That's why he's getting the collection. To my grandchildren, Kevin and Samantha, you laughed at my coins and called them junk. Ethan never laughed. He understood that every coin tells a story, and he wanted to hear those stories." The recording ended with Grandpa holding up several of his most valuable pieces. "These coins are worth approximately $2 million. I'm leaving them to Ethan, not just because he's earned them, but because I trust him to preserve their historical significance rather than just cashing them in. That's what a true collector does." I sat in the bank's viewing room, crying as I watched my grandfather defend his decision from beyond the grave. That afternoon, I called O'Connell and told him about the safety deposit box discovery. "This changes everything," he said after I described the contents. "Your grandfather clearly knew the value and deliberately chose you as the recipient." Richard's incompetency claim just fell apart completely. What about the undue influence allegation? Dead in the water. The video testimony and correspondence show your grandfather making an informed decision based on years of family interactions. Plus, the fact that he repeatedly tried to engage other family members proves you weren't isolating him. So it's over. Should be. I'll send copies of everything to Richard's attorney. Once they see this evidence, they'll have no choice but to withdraw their challenge. Monday morning, Richard called me directly for the first time since this whole mess started. "We need to talk," he said, his voice strained and defeated. "I'm listening. Can we meet somewhere? Just you and me. No lawyers." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a local cafe downtown. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past month. Gray-faced, hollow-eyed, wearing a wrinkled shirt that suggested he wasn't sleeping well. "I saw the video," he said without preamble. "I waited, and the letters. Your lawyer sent copies to our attorney." His voice cracked slightly. "I didn't remember writing those responses to Dad, but seeing them again." "You remembered?" I remembered how dismissive I was. How cruel, really. He stared into his coffee cup. Dad was trying to share something he loved, and I kept shutting him down. He just wanted someone to care about his hobby. I know that now, but at the time, it seemed like he struggled for words, like he was trying to fill empty time with meaningless, busy work. I thought I was protecting him from wasting his energy on trivial things, protecting him from what he loved most. Richard flinched. I was wrong. About the coins, about Dad, about you. We sat in silence for several minutes. "What happens now?" I asked. "I'm withdrawing the legal challenge." My attorney says we have no case anyway. Not with Dad's video testimony. And Kevin's criminal charges. He's pleading guilty to breaking and entering. Probably get probation since it's his first offense. Richard looked up at me. He's ashamed of what he did. We all are. Are you? Yes. Deeply ashamed. We turned into people Dad wouldn't recognize. Fighting over money we never expected to exist. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Deborah wanted me to give you this. Inside was a handwritten letter from my aunt. Ethan, I owe you an apology that I don't know how to make. We were wrong about everything. About you, about your grandfather, about what mattered to him. I've been bitter since my divorce, looking for someone to blame for my financial problems. When we learned about the coins, I saw it as cosmic justice. Finally, some good luck for our family. But it wasn't luck for our family. It was a gift for you, earned through years of genuine relationship with your grandfather. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now why Dad made the choice he did. Deborah, I folded the letter carefully. What about Samantha? She's processing. This has been hard on her, too. She really believes she deserved part of the inheritance that Dad would have wanted her to benefit. Did she? Richard shook his head. In her heart, she knows the truth. She just needs time to accept it. We finished our coffee in relative peace. The first normal conversation we'd had in months. There's something else, Richard said as we prepared to leave. The house. Dad's house. It's too big for just me. And every room reminds me of how badly I handled his final years. What about it? I'm selling it. But before I list it, I wanted to offer you the chance to go through his things. Take whatever has sentimental value. The family photos, his books, personal items. It was a generous gesture, and I appreciated it. That weekend, I spent hours in Grandpa's house going through a lifetime of accumulated memories. I found photo albums documenting our summers together, pictures of us at coin shows, examining our latest finds, celebrating particularly exciting discoveries. In his bedroom dresser, I discovered a journal he'd kept during his final year. The entries were heartbreaking. Ethan called today. He's excited about a 1964 Kennedy half-dollar he found in his pocket change. I told him to check for the proof version. Might be worth something. He's the only one who still cares about these things. Richard came by, but spent the whole visit talking about his work problems. When I tried to show him the new Mercury dime I found, he said he didn't have time for coin talk. Sometimes I wonder if any of them will miss me when I'm gone, or just the money I'm leaving behind. Ethan helped me reorganize the collection today. He's getting good at identifying mint marks and understanding grading. If something happens to me, I know the coins will be in good hands. The final entry was dated 2 weeks before his death. Finished updating my will today. O'Connell thinks I should tell the family about the coin's value, but I disagree. Better to let them think it's worthless until after I'm gone. That way, I'll know their reactions are genuine. Ethan will be surprised by the money, but he'll understand why I chose him. The others, well, I suppose I'll find out what kind of people they really are. Reading his words, I realized Grandpa had been conducting a test from beyond the grave. He'd wanted to see how the family would react to losing a fortune they'd never known existed. Richard, Deborah, Kevin, and Samantha had all failed that test spectacularly. But understanding their failure didn't make me feel superior. It just made me sad for what our family had lost. Tuesday morning, Dr. Albright called with an interesting proposition. I've been thinking about your grandfather's collection, he said. Have you considered donating pieces to a museum? Not selling them, but creating a permanent exhibit that would honor your grandfather's memory while allowing the public to appreciate these remarkable coins. What kind of exhibit? The State University Museum would love to display the collection as an example of how one dedicated collector can preserve important historical artifacts. We could call it the Arthur Hayes Collection and include information about your grandfather's life and collecting philosophy. The idea appealed to me. Grandpa had always said the real value of collecting was preserving history for future generations. I want to keep a few pieces for sentimental reasons, I said. Of course, but imagine school children learning about American history through your grandfather's coins. Imagine other collectors being inspired by his dedication and knowledge. That afternoon, I visited the State University Museum to discuss the details. The curator was thrilled at the prospect of housing such a significant collection. We could create an entire wing dedicated to numismatic history, she explained. Your grandfather's collection would be the centerpiece, but we could expand it to include other donations and educational materials. How would it be presented? We'd tell the story of each major piece, not just its monetary value, but its historical significance. The 1893's Morgan dollar, for example, represents a specific moment in American silver mining history. The 1916 D Mercury dime reflects changes in artistic design during World War I. It was exactly what Grandpa would have wanted. His coins continuing to educate and inspire long after his death. I agreed to donate 80% of the collection to the museum, keeping only the pieces with the most personal significance. The first coin Grandpa had ever shown me, the 1943 copper penny we discovered together at a coin show, and a few others that held special memories. The monetary value of what I was keeping was still substantial, close to $400,000. But the real treasure was the memories and knowledge Grandpa had shared with me. 6 months later, the Arthur Hayes collection opened at the State University Museum. The unveiling drew collectors from across the country, including Mr. Chun and Ms. Miller from Sterling Rare Coins. Richard attended the opening, bringing Deborah and Samantha with him. Kevin was serving his community service sentence and couldn't come, but he'd sent a letter of apology that was surprisingly heartfelt. "Your grandfather would be so proud," Deborah said, standing before a display case containing his most prized coins. "This is exactly what he would have wanted." "I think so, too," I replied. Samantha approached me near the end of the evening. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "A real one, not the half-hearted sorry I gave you months ago." "You don't?" "Yes, I do. I was greedy and jealous and completely wrong about you and Grandpa. You earned this inheritance through genuine love and attention, and I tried to take it away from you because I felt entitled to money I'd never worked for." She gestured toward the exhibit. "But seeing this, understanding what you've done with Grandpa's collection, it's beautiful. It's what family legacy should look like." "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot. Can we try to rebuild our relationship as cousins?" I mean, without all the money drama. I considered her question. The wounds from our family's battle were still fresh, but holding on to anger would honor no one's memory. "I'd like that," I said. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing alone in front of the display featuring Grandpa's most valuable piece, the 1893's Morgan silver dollar that had made Dr. Albright's hands shake during the initial appraisal. The placard read, "This extremely rare coin was acquired by Arthur Hayes in 1987 after years of searching. It represents not just monetary value, but the patience and dedication required for serious collecting. Mr. Hayes often said that the joy of discovery was worth more than any dollar amount." He was right about that, a voice said behind me. I turned to find an elderly man I didn't recognize, wearing a badge that identified him as a fellow collector. "Did you know my grandfather?" I asked. "We corresponded for years, traded coins occasionally. Arthur was one of the most knowledgeable collectors I ever met. Also one of the most generous. He helped me identify several valuable pieces in my own collection." "That sounds like him. He talked about you often in his letters. Said you were the only family member who appreciated the real value of what he was doing. I learned everything I know about collecting from him." The old man smiled. "Then you learned from the best. Your grandfather's reputation in the collecting community was sterling. This exhibit will ensure that reputation lives on." As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this point. What had started as a family crisis over money had become something much more meaningful. A celebration of Grandpa's life and passion. The remaining coins I'd kept were stored in a new safety deposit box. But I'd also started my own collection. Nothing as valuable as Grandpa's, but each piece chosen with the same care and appreciation for history that he taught me. Last month, I received a call from a local middle school teacher. Her students had visited the museum exhibit and wanted to learn more about coin collecting. "Would you be willing to come speak to my class?" she asked. They're fascinated by the idea that ordinary coins could be so valuable and historically significant. I agreed immediately. Walking into that classroom with my magnifying glass and a selection of coins to show the students, I felt Grandpa's presence strongly. This was exactly what he would have wanted, sharing the joy of discovery with young people who might develop their own passion for collecting. "How many of you have old coins at home?" I asked the 30 eager faces looking back at me. Nearly every hand went up. "Well," I said, pulling out my magnifying glass and placing a worn penny on the projector. "Let me teach you what to look for." For the next hour, I shared everything Grandpa had taught me about identifying valuable coins, understanding historical significance, and appreciating the stories that each piece could tell. When class ended, several students approached with coins they brought from home. I examined each one carefully, explaining what made it special or ordinary, valuable or common. One boy, probably about the same age I'd been when I first started learning from Grandpa, showed me a 1955 penny with unusual markings. "Is this worth anything?" he asked hopefully. I looked at it under the magnifying glass and felt my heart skip. It was a 1955 double-die penny, one of the most famous error coins in American numismatics. "Well," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "you might want to have this looked at by a professional." "Really? Is it valuable?" "It might be. The important thing is that it's special regardless of its dollar value. This coin tells a story about how mistakes at the mint can create something unique and historically significant." The boy's eyes lit up with the same excitement I'd felt all those years ago when Grandpa first showed me a rare coin. As I packed up my materials, the teacher thanked me for inspiring her students. "You've got a gift for explaining complex concepts in ways kids can understand," she said. "Ever consider teaching?" I hadn't, but the idea appealed to me. Maybe there was a way to turn my knowledge into something more than just a hobby. 6 months later, I left my job as a junior accountant to become a part-time museum educator, developing programs for school groups and conducting workshops for new collectors. The work doesn't pay nearly as much as accounting, but the financial cushion from Grandpa's coins allows me to pursue something I'm passionate about rather than just something that pays the bills. Every day, I get to share the knowledge Grandpa gave me with people who are discovering the joy of collecting for the first time. And sometimes late at night, when I'm cataloging new acquisitions for the museum, I can almost hear his voice. "Every coin tells a story, Ethan. The trick is learning how to listen." The family relationships that were damaged during our legal battle are slowly healing. Richard and I have lunch occasionally, and our conversations now include genuine interest in each other's lives rather than just obligatory family updates. Deborah has started volunteering at a financial literacy program for divorced women, channeling her energy into helping others rather than dwelling on her own setbacks. Kevin completed his community service and enrolled in a business ethics course at the local community college. He's still embarrassed about the break-in, but he's working to rebuild trust with the family. Samantha has become one of my strongest supporters, promoting the museum exhibit on Facebook and bringing her friends to see Grandpa's collection. Last Christmas, for the first time since Grandpa's death, our family dinner was peaceful. We shared stories about him that weren't centered on money or inheritance, memories of his terrible jokes, his legendary stubbornness, his unexpected moments of generosity. At one point, Samantha asked if I'd brought any coins to show everyone. I pulled out a 1964 Kennedy half-dollar. Not particularly valuable, but historically significant as one of the first coins to honor a recently assassinated president. "Grandpa always said this coin represented how quickly history can change," I told them. "Kennedy was alive when they designed it, but dead before most were released." Richard examined it carefully. "I never thought about coins as historical documents before." That's exactly how Grandpa saw them. Each one is a snapshot of a specific moment in time. For the first time in years, our family conversation was focused on learning and sharing rather than competing and arguing. As I drove home that evening, I realized that Grandpa's final gift hadn't been the money at all. It had been the lesson that true wealth comes from relationships built on genuine care and shared interests, not from grabbing whatever you can get. His coin collection had tested our family's character, and while we'd failed initially, we'd ultimately learned to value what really mattered. The coins themselves were just metal in history. The real treasure was understanding that some things, love, respect, genuine interest in others, can't be bought or inherited. They have to be earned one conversation at a time. And in the end, that's the most valuable lesson Grandpa ever taught.